The Supreme Court has yet again rolled over and shown their belly to the president and now has allowed him to do mass firings at the education department. I mean, first of all, the idea that Donald Trump picks the wrestling lady, Linda McMahon, to head up the Department of Education is already a joke. I mean, he's filled his cabinet with billionaires, Fox News hosts, and podcasters. I mean, I don't want to get started on that, but the fact that he picked Linda McMahon is basically telling you everything you need to know. The Republican Party wants to destroy every bit of government from the inside. And then while it is destroyed, laying there in front of the American people, the Republican Party wants to step back, point at it and go, look at that. Government doesn't work for you. Never mind that it's been our mission for the last 40 years to destroy the Department of Education. Never mind that fact. But now that we've destroyed it, look, it doesn't work. Golly gee, how did that happen? Let's privatize it. Anyway, we've got Supreme Court allows Donald Trump to proceed with mass firings at the Department of Education. Supreme Court on Monday said that President Donald Trump may proceed with his plan to carry out mass layoffs at the Department of Education in the latest win for the White House at the conservative High Court. I want you to keep this in mind, that what he's trying to do, his idea, is to send everything back to the states so nothing can be funded federally. And generally speaking, a lot of education is funded by the states. A lot of it's due to local taxes in your area. So you live in a wealthy neighborhood, then your school is going to be in much better shape because it's done on property taxes. It didn't always used to be this way, but thanks to Reagan back in the 70s when he was governor of California, that's kind of where it all started. You know, funding schools through property taxes. And then it just kind of spread across the country like a cancer. But if you live in a poor neighborhood, then your school is not going to be funded very well. And that's when the federal government comes in to help you with certain programs, especially for the poorer schools in poor districts and poorer areas. And those places are going to be affected the most. And generally speaking, red states, they don't often spend that much of their state money on education to begin with. And with these cuts, it's going to be much worse. It's going to be bad in all of the states, blue or red, it doesn't matter. It's going to be bad, but it's going to be worse in red states. So when if you're in a red state and you're listening to me and that after school program gets shut down for some reason, now you know why. In an unsigned order, the justices lifted for now a lower court ruling that had indefinitely paused Trump's plan to get rid of the Department of Education. Supreme Court decision, by the way, what decision? They just decided. There's no ruling. I mean, they have a 6-3 majority. The Republicans have a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court, and not one of those Republicans wrote anything in agreement with this. The only person that said anything were the Democratic judges, and you'll get to the quote from Sotomayor in a minute. Supreme Court decision puts that ruling on hold while legal challenges play out. What? Until it gets back to the Supreme Court? So you're waiting for him to destroy everything for the next 2 years, and then when it comes back to you, are you going to say anything different? The Supreme Court is desperately trying to maintain relevance by giving Donald Trump everything he wants, because if they're afraid, if they deny him something, then he's going to look at them and go, you and what army? And then the Supreme Court is irrelevant. But by giving Donald Trump everything he wants and not judging things by the law, you are making yourself irrelevant anyway. You're just a rubber stamp. Within 2 hours, the Department of Education sent notices to employees indicating its immediate resuming to plans to shrink the department. CNN reviewed emails sent Monday to some employees who were initially fired in April before the judges stepped in, informing them of the Supreme Court's decision, saying that they would be let go on August 1st. The department appreciates your service and recognizes the difficulty of the moment. The notice says the RIF action is not a reflection upon your performance or conduct, and it is solely to agency restructuring as described in previous correspondence. Yeah, that sounds very loving and warm. Supreme Court decision was attached to the notice in a scathing dissent. The only person that wrote anything about it, Justice Sotomayor, the court's senior liberal member, said her colleagues had made an indefensible decision to let Trump proceed with taking apart an agency that ordinarily can be dismantled only by Congress. And that's the whole thing. Donald Trump is trying to do a line item veto after the Supreme Court allocates funds to education. That is completely unconstitutional. Once the Congress, which is represented by the people, makes a decision of funding, the executive branch is supposed to execute those laws that were passed by Congress. They are not supposed to go behind them and backdoor and do a line item veto going, I will fund this, but not this. No, honey. Congress said to fund it, you fund it. You don't just get to willy-nilly pick and choose what you want. They've been trying to do this line item veto thing for a long time, and now it looks like with the Supreme Court's actions, Donald Trump now has it. The majority is either willfully blind to the implications of this ruling or naive. They're being willfully blind. They're not naive. They know exactly what they're doing. But either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is grave. Sotomayor wrote in the dissent, which was joined in full by the other two liberal justices. Trump ordered mass layoffs at the department earlier this year, cutting its workforce in half. But lower courts have blocked that effort, noticing that the Education Department was created by Congress. Yeah, it was. The president praised the High Court's decision in a Truth Social post. Jesus. The United States Supreme Court has handed the major victory to the parents and students across the country. Yeah, tell that to the parents and students whose education just got slashed. I'm sure that they're really happy about it. By declaring the Trump administration may proceed on returning the functions of the Department of Education back to the states. Trump said, thanking the Supreme Court for their decision. Now with this great Supreme Court decision, our Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, the wrestling lady, may begin a very important process. McMahon, in a statement, described the court's decision as significant win for students and families. No, honey, it's a significant win for private education. They want to privatize all of education. They want to give you small little bits, little stipends, so you can pick and choose which private school you send your kid to. They don't mention that that little stipend they give you won't even cover half the cost of a private education. So now you, the mother, the father, the parent of that child, are going to have to come up with the other half, an expense that you didn't have to pay for, but now you do. Quote, we will carry out the reduction of force, that's the RIF, to promote efficiency and accountability. There goes that waste, fraud, and abuse efficiency model bullshit. And to ensure resources are directed where they matter, to private schools, to students, parents, and teachers. As I'm sure the teachers that got laid off, they're really happy about that too. As we return education to the states, the administration will continue to perform the statutory duties while empowering families and teachers by reducing education bureaucracy. She said a whole lot of words there that just mean privatization. Sotomayor put out a quote I want to get to. She made clear in her dissent that she thought Trump's arguments to the High Court disregarded the reality on the ground. Quote, the record unambiguously refutes that account. Neither the president nor Secretary McMahon made any secret of their intent to ignore the constitutional duties. President Trump repeatedly calls for the immediate abolition of the Department of Education, both during his campaign and after taking office, rather than wait for legislative action, which, by the way, they have the majority in Congress. If they really wanted to do this defunding, they could do it the legal way, through Congress. But Donald Trump doesn't want to wait. He wants this shit done right now. So, Constitution be damned. Let me see here. Rather than wait for the legislative action to begin shuttering the department, McMahon slashes the agency's workforce in half, conceitedly, without analyzing the effect of those terminations on the department's statutory mandated functions. The court's decision, Sotomayor wrote, will unleash untold harm, delaying or denying educational opportunities and leaving students to suffer from discrimination, sexual assault, and other civil rights violations without federal resources Congress intended. The majority apparently deems it more important to free the government from paying employees it has no right to fire than to avert these very real harms while the litigation continues. It is absolutely, I mean, I hate using this word over and over again, but it is disgusting. It's disgusting that the Supreme Court has basically abdicated all of their judicial authority to the executive branch. Never mind Congress already abdicating their power to the executive branch. They all believe in this unitary executive authority where the president is essentially a king. And if I'm not mistaken, the Revolutionary War was fought over the fact that we had representation, we had no representation, yet we had all the taxation. You think your taxes are going to stop? No, honey, they're not going to stop. They're not going to get cut at all. You know, we've already seen what the big, beautiful bill does. If you're in the top 10%, your taxes get cut. Everybody else, it sucks to suck. Anyway, we've got, is it this one? No, this one here. Education Weekly, Trump admin can proceed with education deputy layoff. Supreme Court rules. Over the dissent of 3 justices, the High Court removes an injunction and allows what critics see as a dismantling of the education department to proceed. There is the wrestling lady who thought that AI was A1 steak sauce. Yeah, she seems like the right person for the job. U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon outside the West Wing following a cabinet meeting at the White House on April 11th, 2025 in Washington. McMahon is carrying out a Trump administration plan to lay off roughly 1,400 education department employees. Move, critics say, is aimed at dismantling the agency, which seems like they are doing now. Supreme Court on Monday over sharp dissent from 3 liberal justices granted a request by the Trump administration to allow the Department of Education to proceed with layoffs of 1,400 employees. The court order in McMahon versus New York is not a final ruling on the merits, but it removes a barrier that has blocked the administration from taking the first steps towards dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. Sotomayor's dissent, joined by Justices Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson, called the action indefensible and cast it as allowing the President Trump and the Secretary of Education Linda McMahon to gut the department. When the executive publicly announces its intent to break the law, then executes on that promise, it is the judiciary's duty to check that lawlessness, not expedite it. I mean, he said that he was going to do this, and he is actually doing it. Something unconstitutional. You are not allowed to defund an agency. Congress has that power, but they've abdicated their power to the president as well. The majority is either willfully blind or to the implications of its ruling or naive, but either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is grave. Now, we actually had an opportunity to stop some of this back when the beginning of the reconciliation process. And here is Chuck Schumer. God, he's got the most punchable face I've ever seen. Chuck Schumer is this was back, I want to say, when was this? 3 months ago. This is when that reconciliation was just starting. The process to get to the reconciliation, big, beautiful bill that we now have, thanks to the Republican Party and Donald Trump, but also thanks to Chuck Schumer, because this is the opportunity where he had to stop it. He could shut down the government, and then the Republican Party would have to start negotiating on some of these provisions, like cutting Medicaid, cutting the Department of Education, cutting into food stamps. That is when Democrats actually had some power. And at that point, Chuck Schumer, the ostensible leader in the Senate for the Democrats, basically played concierge and allowed people to just vote any way you want to. It does not matter. This is Chuck Schumer defending that decision that has aged like milk.
Glad to be back.
I want to start with your support of the GOP funding bill and the criticism that you have received as a result. I know that you maintain that a shutdown would have been far worse than passing the Republican bill. What do you see that the vast majority of Hill Democrats don't see? Why are they wrong in saying that you should have blocked it?
Well, Jeff, I knew when I made my decision there'd be a lot of people who disagreed with it. But I felt it was imperative that I do. We had an awful choice, a Hobson's choice, between a CR bill, which had no Democratic input, a continuing resolution to fund the government, and a government shutdown. As bad as the CR bill was, the shutdown, I'd say, would be 15, 20 times worse, and let me explain. In a shutdown, the whole government shuts down, and then the executive branch solely determines what is, quote, essential and what is not essential. So they could say on day 2 of the shutdown, SNAP, food for kids, not essential. On day 4, no transit funds, mass transit or other, are essential. We'll only declare as essential in the transportation bill air traffic controllers. On day 6, Medicaid.
Look, we could go on and listen to this bullshit excuse, but, you know, speaking of SNAP, yeah, you know, they could cut SNAP. Well, guess what, man? They fucking did. You gave them the springboard to jump right into this. You, with this weak sauce leadership in the Democratic Party, you enabled them to move forward. You did not shut down the government. You did not use your leverage to force them into some kind of negotiation. And now all of those things, all these things that you're saying that they could have done, they could have taken away SNAP, they can take away health care, they are now doing it because of your inaction. And just so you remember, it's not just Donald Trump that's been wanting to cut the Department of Education. This has been going on for years. This is the 2012 presidential primary debate. And listen to this moron.
It's 3 agencies of government. And I will tell you, it's 3 agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
That right there is Rick Perry, you know, a blast from the past, moron from Texas, who is telling you that he is desperate to get rid of 3 agencies. Of course, he can only remember 2 of them, but he does remember the Department of Education. Let's see how far he stumbles.
5, okay. So commerce, education, and the
EPA?
EPA, there you go. No, okay.
Hardy har, let's cut the EPA, commerce, and the Department of Education. Genius, fucking genius. And it wasn't just in 2012. Here's old Ronnie Reagan back in the 80s.
And would have already started, if your hypothesis is correct, a planned and orderly transfer back to the states and local communities of functions the federal government has usurped and which it has proven it is incapable of operating. And one of the first of those would be welfare. One of the second would be in the field of education. I would like to dissolve the $10 billion National Department of Education created by President Carter and turn schools back to the local school districts where we built the greatest public school system the world has ever seen.
This has been a pipe dream for Republicans for over 40 years, trying to get rid of the Department of Education. You know, they talk about bootstraps. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, I've heard this quote before. It's a good quote. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots. And an education is part of those boots to help educate you for a better life. They don't want an educated proletariat. They want you dumb and docile. You know, Donald Trump joked about, I love the poorly educated. They do, because they know that they could feed you any line of bullshit and you will buy it. And they have been desperately for 40 years trying to take away a right that we have had for, you know, for all of my recent memory. Education. I went to a public school. I got a pretty good education. Some things could have been better, but that's to do with funding, you know, and it depends on where you live. If you're living in a wealthy area, you're going to have a better chance of better education. If you're living in a poorer area that's not very funded very well, you're going to have a less than stellar education. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, and then I also grew up in a poor neighborhood. And I remember the differences between those educations. And when you defund it down to the bone solely so you can privatize it, you are trying to take away something that poor people get to share in with wealthy people, an education. It is, you know, it's the great equalizer. You can have a great mind coming out of a poor community just as well as you can have it coming out of a wealthy neighborhood. But if you defund it, if you cut that plant off at the roots, you will ensure it never grows. There's a reason why we have a brain drain in this country. We are scaring away foreign students from coming in this country. We are cutting sciences and in education, so less people in this country will be able to grow in mathematics and sciences. We will lose our competitive edge around the world. When I hear Republicans yelling about China taking over the world, we are handing it to them right now by cutting out our math and our sciences and our education. You are ensuring that your people will never be able to have a proper life, a proper educated, successful life. You keep them dumb, poor, treat them like mushrooms, feed them shit, and keep them in the dark. And, you know, throw red meat to the masses, and they'll always vote for you. And from Ronald Reagan to Rick Perry to George W. Bush to Donald Trump, they have been trying for years to kill the Department of Education. And sadly, it looks like they've done it. They've been successful. Thanks to the Supreme Court and the fecklessness of the Republicans in Congress, they've allowed the new king to take away education from the rest of us. And I worry about all of the young students, the young children out there, but I worry more for young students in red states, because this is going to hit you so much harder. Your state is already, you know, they've already defunded education down to the bone, and a lot of them rely on federal funds. And now that those federal funds are going to dry up and you are relying on, I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, notoriously the worst education system in the country. And it's no coincidence that they are the least funded education systems in the country. Anyway, I am, this is all very sad. It's all very sad. This is going to affect us for generations to come. And it is much easier to destroy than it is to create. Years and years trying to create an education system that will help out everyone can be torn down just like that. And we're going to be living through it. So I'd say good luck to all the parents out there who are looking for education for their kids. I hope you got money. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like and subscribe. Keep rocking.